you look up, my apologies for that audio. So make sure you look out for that email from us with the recording link, as well as additional resources that we will be sharing. Without further ado, I'd like to share a little bit more about Lisa and her background. So Lisa is a certified career coach who helps people find and secure their dream green job. She is a alum with a BS in Natural Resources and the Environment. Lisa has spent 10 years leading career services for graduate students from diverse disciplines in the University of Michigan School for Environment and Sustainability. Prior to that, she worked for a national environmental NGO for 12 years. And in 2016, she launched her own private practice, the Green Career Advisor. I'll also mention that Lisa is a partner coach with us at the Alumni Association and provides discounted coaching services to University of Michigan alumni. So please do reach out to her if you have greater need for one-on-one coaching services. Otherwise, I'm going to hand it off to you, Lisa. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Louise. And hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here with other fellow U of M alumni. I thought I'd start off the conversation here on social impact careers. I'd really love to get a better feel of the audience. So I'm going to ask Louise and Brooke to launch a short poll to ask, where are you in your social impact careers? Would just love to hear where people are at, just browsing, seriously thinking about a social impact career, or already in a social impact career. So if you could vote. I would also love to hear, for those of you that may already be in a social impact career, I would love to hear from one or two volunteers that might be willing to say, what sort of career, social impact career that you're currently engaged in right now. You could, when we finish this poll here, you can either put that in the chat to share the career that you're currently in, if you're in social impact career, or if you want to and are brave, you can even unmute yourself, or I think that will be facilitated by Louise and Brooke, but they can call on volunteers to share.
So Lisa, so far we did not get any volunteers to unmute, but maybe we'll wait for a second and see if anyone chimes in.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and then share those results with everyone. We have one volunteer. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Gabriella, we'd love to hear from you. So give us 1 second here.
Hi, all. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi. Well, right now I am actually working for a national nonprofit called Moms Can Air Force. So I'm doing environmental advocacy work at the moment, so organizing work. But I went to school with a degree in environmental and social responsibility, so that's kind of the route that I wanted to go in time. This pandemic kind of made applying for jobs at the time when I graduated kind of difficult. So I kind of just wanted to, hear from you, Lisa, and kind of learn from this webinar.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing, Gabriella. Did we see any in the chat? I'm not sure if there are other examples of careers. I don't see any, so I think I can move on, but I appreciate hearing from an alum on the call about the role that they're currently in. So I'll go ahead and get started. So today, what we'll be covering will be, of course, I want to give a little bit of a definition of what is a social impact career. These are very broad careers. There are so many different opportunities out there. And so I want to at least touch on, what is a social impact career. And then also looking at a few examples of social impact careers that you can look at. Some of them will be U of M alumni that I'm featuring, and others. I'll also talk about how do you find these social impact jobs. I know that it can be tremendously frustrating to try to find some of these unique jobs. Just doing keyword searches alone can be very challenging to find where these roles may be. So I have some great websites to share with you to find those social impact roles. I'm also going to do a special session on how to find fit. So for many of you, it sounds like I think the majority of you are thinking about, 59% of you are thinking about a career in social impact, which to me probably indicates that, you have some maybe early inclinations of what you might like to do, but, in terms of understanding the fit, that would be something that might be super helpful to talk about today. So I've actually developed a little bit of a worksheet. When we get to that section, we can talk about, you'll get a link to the worksheet that you can look at and fill in later to help you really put down on paper how to find fit or think about that. And then we'll talk about positioning yourself for a social impact career. We'll be talking about some of the transferable skills. So for those of you that are changing jobs, job changers looking to move into a social impact career, I think it's really important to think about what are the skills that you may already have that are transferable for social impact careers, and then you can build from there. And then we'll also be talking about specific things you can be doing to stand out in the social impact job market and application process. And then we'll end with a lot of time, hopefully, for questions and answers as we can discuss those. So starting off with what is a social impact career? The definition of social impact taken from Michigan Ross Business and Impact website. It's a significant and positive change that addresses a pressing social challenge. So then a social impact career really focuses on making a significant positive change to address a pressing social challenge. And those can be in a lot of different realms, certainly in the environment, but for health, social justice, education, housing, arts, youth development, etc. Those are just a few examples of topic areas. So how is a social impact career different? There are a number of different areas that I want to highlight in terms of what makes a social impact career different. So one thing that might be on the top of people's mind is salary, right? So this is just a look at a polling of MBA graduates from a different program that were working in social impact industries. So keep in mind, these are MBA graduates, so a lot of them looking in the private sector typically, but their salaries for social impact were in the 96K range compared to those in consulting, let's say in the 150K range, or 130K for financial services and technology, according to the school's report. So if you look across social impact careers outside of the private sector, and those that don't require an MBA, salaries are, even less than that, but, the rewards are high. We'll talk about that in a minute. But just an important point. So for those of you that are maybe mid-career and working in high salary roles, I've heard that comment from a couple of folks early on. We did some polling. And so if a high salary is really critical to you, I would really encourage you to do some research on salaries for social impact roles that you're exploring to really ground truth. What are those potential salary ranges that I might be considering for these roles? So there's a link here. You'll get this PowerPoint. You can click on this. The research on salaries will take you to a great listing of research, some websites where you can do research on salaries for some of these roles. So some of the benefits of working in a social impact career, of course, right? Some of them are intangible, right? It's the pride that you have in working for the greater good. Some people will say it doesn't even feel like I'm, doing work. The work that I'm doing is like something that I'm truly passionate about. I get up every day and I'm excited to do it. I've also heard from many people that they really enjoy working in this field because they're surrounded by like-minded colleagues. So people who are just as passionate about them, about making a difference in the world and in their communities. And depending on the sector, sometimes in many of these social impact careers outside of the private sector, you will find more time to enjoy friends and family outside of work. Another major difference in with a social impact career, of course, is that I'll be harping on this issue a lot throughout my presentation, but social impact employers are highly mission driven. So fit is everything to these companies. And so I'll be talking about this more later, but when you apply to these organizations and when employers are considering you for different roles, they'll want to see and know, why are you passionate about working on this issue? And of course, what experience perhaps do you have on these issues? Social impact careers are in high demand. If you look across, I think, as Louise said earlier, that millennials are very passionate about working in this field. So our youngest generations, 90% of millennials say that it's important to work for, that their work has a positive impact on the world. So this is something that is deeply felt by many. And I'll say also, as a personal anecdote, working in my coaching practice, I have been seeing more and more clients come to me mid-career that are seeking a career change. I think part of it might have to do with the pandemic and having so much time to contemplate life and life choices, that many people are looking to have a more meaningful career where they can make a difference in the world. I hear that over and over. Of course, social impact careers span all different sectors and industries. Here are just a few of the ones where I'm going to be highlighting today, some examples of careers in these sectors, but I'm not going to be covering them all outside of these. So nonprofit, government, academia, corporate, and also business corporation, B corporations. So starting with social impact careers, in the nonprofit sector, I have a couple of folks that I wanted to highlight. So Michelle Mabson is actually a student that I worked with. She's a U of M alum from the School for Environment and Sustainability. So she has both a MS and a Master of Public Health. And so she works for Earth Justice, a national environmental NGO that has a whole bunch of attorneys on staff, and they do great work to help basically strengthen environmental laws to protect the earth. And there's an interesting article that I saw about their work and other NGOs that have been really using environmental attorneys to help kind of stem some of the attacks on environmental policies and things like that. And they've been very successful. A second person that I wanted to highlight, or a career, Dave Moran is the co-founder of Michigan Innocence Clinic. He's a law professor at Michigan, and he's an alum from Michigan with both a JD and a BS in physics. The Michigan Innocence Clinic, which he co-founded, is a nonprofit which looks to use the legal research to help basically release prisoners who are wrongfully convicted and in prison, often, life sentences or decades-long sentences. He's been very successful in his work to help get some of these prisoners released that have been wrongly convicted. So very rewarding work. But I'll say across the span, I'll highlight some of these folks. The career examples you see are just a few. Sometimes they're in the higher level leadership roles, but just know that there are so many different roles in social impact careers outside of the scientists or founders or presidents, things like that. So with nonprofits, there are opportunities in communications and environmental policy, administrative roles, people with financial background or accounting, et cetera. There's a lot of different roles that you may be able to find there. In the government sector, I'll look at both federal agencies and local governments as examples. So the first example, Dr. Ed Nam, he leads up the Land and Chemicals Redevelopment Division for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and he's an alum a couple times over. But if you look across federal government agencies, many of them are doing public service work, so social impact work. And so if you look across all the different agencies combined, federal agencies, really the federal government is the largest employer in the nation. So that's one you'll want to pay attention to. The second person I want to highlight here, Chad Bowman. He is working for a local city government in Memphis, Tennessee, and he leads up their weatherization assistance program. So his work focuses on helping lower income residents that might struggle to pay their utility bills. So they go in and help weatherize their homes so that these vulnerable people won't have their electricity, their air conditioning, their heating shut off through their work. So very satisfying as well. In academia, there are roles. So we have an alum, Bindi Daria, who's deputy director of the Center for Social Impact and Philanthropy at a university in India. So that's an example of an alum working in social impact in academia. Martin Garcia is a social justice campus ministry and community partnerships outreach coordinator. So a lot of outreach work is available in this field as well, and he works for a university there. Corporate careers, just a couple of examples. An alum who works as the head of social impact for Zoom. So Roxana Shirkota. So you can click on any of these profiles when you get the presentation, and you can go straight to their LinkedIn profile to look at their backgrounds, education, past work experience. I found LinkedIn profiles to be super helpful as you explore different career ideas. I should also add, when I list that they're alums, I may be listing just their U of M degrees, but often some of these people will have additional degrees at other institutions as well. So you'll want to look carefully at their profiles. Amy Braun Center is another alum that I worked with at the School for Environment and Sustainability. She's now the Chief Sustainability Officer at Kellogg Company, cereal company, local in Michigan. And she has a couple of degrees from Michigan, but sustainability roles are also, one of the most high in demand types of roles that you'll see at colleges. You'll see them at companies. You'll see them at the local government levels as well. And lastly, a different type of focus area, the B Corp. So certified B corporations are businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance and transparency, legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. So these are unique businesses that actually have to be certified to qualify for this designation. A couple examples of B Corps would be, here is one, Simon Griffiths. He's the co-founder and CEO of a company with a funny name, Who Gives a Crap. So this is actually a sustainable toilet paper company. I'm actually a customer of theirs. I love their products. So this company actually, their toilet paper is made out of recycled office paper. So no trees are cut down to create the toilet paper, and they give half of their proceeds to fund projects to build toilet facilities for communities that can't afford them. So they're also helping contribute to clean water initiatives as well. Here's an alum, Benny Joseph, Chief Technology Officer at Allbirds. He's an alum with a computer engineering degree and now leads up Allbirds technology work there. I've heard that Allbirds is doing a unique partnership coming up with Adidas. They're going to be releasing the most sustainable running shoe on the markets. I think it's going to have about half the emissions, carbon emissions, as other running shoes through this partnership. Next, I would like to highlight kind of where do you find these social impact jobs? What are the websites that you might be able to find some successes in looking for these jobs, exploring these jobs? I'll be talking a lot about having you look at individual job postings that you're considering to really decide whether you have the skills and the education background to be competitive in these roles. So here are a lot of great websites to look at those. So idealist.org, of course, is a great one. This one is a place where you can find great social impact jobs and internships, but also volunteer roles. So for those of you that have gaps to fill in your skills and your education work, this is a great place to find volunteer roles. They also highlight grad schools, and there's a lot of great career advice articles on finding social impact careers. I've written some articles for them as well, so please check them out. I've also compiled, the next one is the top 50 green job posting websites. So this is something I have compiled over the years. So if you're interested in green, environmental, sustainability, natural resources careers, this is a great listing of websites to look at. Nonprofit and foundation jobs. This is a place to find some of those roles as well. The next one, social impact jobs, where to find and how to gain your better for the world career. This is both an article and it's also recorded as a podcast, interestingly. So you can either listen to it or read it, but within here, there's a lot of great sites that they plug for social impact jobs. Work for Good is a place where you can search for social impact jobs by either job function or focus area. There's a social service and social works jobs board, and tech jobs for good as well. So here I thought it would be interesting. I've heard kind of our pre-screening, we asked people a little bit like, what are some questions that you might have? We heard from some people from all around the world. So I would love to hear quickly in the chat if people can say where they're from, especially if you're from outside of the US. Would love to see what countries are represented here. So this section that I want to highlight is talking about places to find jobs outside of the US as well. I think the first listing here, 51 best places to look for social impact jobs, that it contains many that are US focused, but there are also many on here that also have international postings as well. The next one is for international development jobs. Many of these are abroad as well. So international development work is basically, that encompasses a lot of different sectors as well. So nonprofits, government, private sector, consulting, but international development jobs are typically those in developing countries that are working to address a social or environmental issue. And so a couple of great websites to look at, Next Billion and DevX are a couple to look at there. School community job boards, also internationally focused. You can look for jobs with nonprofits, government, and corporate social responsibility. There's a B Corp job board itself. And then I want to highlight a special resource for those of you looking for jobs, especially globally. Koya Partners is a third-party recruiting firm that can be helpful. They work with both companies to do high-level recruiting. They have a place where you can look at their website and see some of the high-level roles, the do-good roles that they're helping companies recruit for, but there's also a place for job seekers to post a profile so that you can be found as well. And I think they do provide some coaching services as well, but they focus on helping job seekers who are looking for mission-driven employers and vice versa. So that's a great resource. Let me see, I've lost, let's see, lots of people. Let's see, someone from the US looking to move back to Brazil, India. So we do have New York City, South Africa, San Francisco. So lots of US, but some global as well. So I'm hoping this resource will be helpful to you for those looking at international opportunities. I've also heard from many people looking for remote jobs. So of course, the pandemic has had many of us working from home, and it actually feels good, right? In most cases, to be able to have that option and flexibility. So for those of you looking for remote jobs, there's a great nonprofit remote jobs board that you can take a look at. There's also kind of a broader one that looks at 62 websites to look for remote jobs. So hopefully that's helpful to you as well. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about how can you find your fit, or how can you start thinking about fit for those of you that are seriously thinking about it, but maybe needs a little bit of help to think about what sort of role would be appropriate. So I'll try to go through this fairly quickly. Hopefully Louise or Brooke can put in the chat. There's a link to a worksheet that I have developed for today. It's Finding Your Social Impact Career Direction worksheet. It's just kind of a simple 2-pager to get you thinking about, like, to put on paper more information about your background, your skill sets, and to help you think through some roles that might be a good fit. So I'll run through this fairly quickly. I'm not expecting you to fill this out right here on the spot, but it's something that you can use as a resource later as you have a little bit more time. So of course, you want to think about your education background. Are you willing to go back to school or not? You know, so what are the parameters there? What is your education background? And then, of course, thinking about what is the positive change that you want to make in the world or in your community. So thinking about what are the social impact issues that perhaps you want to focus on. It's also very important to think about where you have some experiences as well. So it's not enough to be just passionate about an issue. When you're applying for roles, employers are going to want to see what have you done, even if it's in a volunteer capacity. You know, they'll want to see that you've done some work on that issue. You'll also want to think about some skill sets that you're good at doing that you would love to use in a future role. So this is something kind of like informally that I've used a couple of times as I've made career shifts in my professional life. So just, you know, I worked for National Wildlife Federation for 12 years and was coming up on a career change. And I sat down and wrote out all of the skills and things that I really enjoyed doing over those 12 years to help me figure out next steps. And what I came up with was that I really loved working with young people, college students. I had done a bunch of work to help college students and women leaders rise to higher levels of leadership within different conservation organizations. And that's how it led me to think of becoming a green career coach of sorts. So this process has helped me. So then from making that list of skill sets that you feel you're really good at doing and that you would love to use in a future role, thinking about what are the job titles that would require these skills and would also hopefully value your education background. And then you would want to look at job postings with those titles to really ground truth, do you have the right education and skill sets? And you should be noting any skills or education gaps that you have. So those are ones, maybe if you're willing to work towards those, that's kind of your homework to do. And then at some point, you'll want to narrow that down to your top 1 or 2, perhaps, that you feel you're most qualified for if you're planning to apply immediately or soon, and that you're also passionate about. Would also recommend maybe thinking about making a spreadsheet. I'm sure many of you already do this, but making a targeted spreadsheet list of employers that would hire for these types of jobs that you've identified and that you'd be interested in working for. And then also in the spreadsheet, you'll probably want to add people who work at these companies that you can talk to and conduct informational interviews, these short 30-minute conversations with people working for the companies or working in the roles that you're targeting, so that you can learn more about the roles and what skills do you need, and maybe some tips on getting your foot in the door with those organizations. So I have a link here, and I think it can also be thrown in the chat section, but a sample informational interview questions list. So if you're like, what do I ask these people in these informational interviews? I have a nice cheat sheet, a starter list that you can look at and build from there. A lot of people will ask me, where do I find these people, right? So some of you may have some people in mind that work at these companies, but other people might not maybe have such a vigorous network, especially if you're switching career fields. So the way to find people to talk with, a couple ideas. look at a LinkedIn company webpage. And then from there, you can see links to the number of staff that have LinkedIn profiles, and then scroll through there and find an appropriate person that you might reach out to. Same thing with a website. You can go to the employer's website, look at their staff directory, and find an appropriate person to reach out and set up an informational interview. And then assessments, kind of lastly here, career assessment tools can be very helpful in further refining or further thinking about where is a good fit for you. So if you click on this link later, it goes to an article that will walk you through a few professional career assessment tools that you can use to help you determine career direction. One that I really like that's an informal career assessment that anyone can do is the O-Net Interest Profiler Questionnaire on mynextmove.org. This is a free to take. It's only 60 questions. It basically asks you how well you like to do 60 different tasks, work tasks. And then it helps identify categories of work where you score highly in. And then you can actually see job examples that really focus on that type of work. So it's a really nice framework, big picture thinking, first look at, what type of job would I truly enjoy doing? So I recommend that to consider taking later. A couple things, again, I know there's a lot of career changers on here, but if you're thinking about how can I make the switch, a couple of options come to mind. So one, you might think about finding a role with a similar function at a social impact organization where you'd be really competitive and could perhaps jump right in right now. And then down the line, you may be able to work to make a transition to a role, perhaps if you're thinking of switching roles later on. But if you have any of these skills, for example, finance or accounting, IT, marketing, etc., HR, those are easy ones typically where you could slide into a social impact organization doing the same role perhaps that you've had in the past, building your experience and skill set, and then maybe making a transition later. Another option to consider would be, if you're willing to do this, is perhaps start at a more entry-level role and then move up within the organization. So a few position titles for starter level roles, but everyone's at a different level. So those are just a few examples. And then I recommend maybe testing out a new role. So if you're not quite sure that this is the role for you, you can do a number of different things to test it out. So perhaps a job shadow, you could arrange to come and work at an office, assuming, as COVID days start to go behind us and more people are vaccinated, more employers may be willing to allow you to come in and do these sorts of things, a day-long job shadowing, perhaps a volunteer role that you could pitch, or for students, an internship perhaps, or other people, maybe a short-term contract role would be a great way to try it out. As for ways that you can position yourself for a social impact career and think about how do I assess those gaps, right? How do I assess and how do I fill those gaps that I may have to help me transition into a social impact career? Again, as I said earlier, look at these job postings, go to those websites that I've listed, look at real job postings that you've identified once you've thought about the career direction and some job titles that you might consider. Go and look at job postings with those titles, and then identify where those gaps are and make a plan. Decide if you're willing to go back for additional education, or maybe that rules out a certain path, and then you look at a different role where perhaps you don't need as extensive retraining or education. In some cases, it's maybe doing a certificate program instead of a full degree program. In other cases, it might be taking online classes, or pitching a volunteer internship role that you could gain that experience. I would like to talk about universal, the transferable job skills. So this is something that I did when I first started at Michigan in the career office, looking at what are the skills that people need to succeed in a social impact career. So basically, I looked at hundreds of different job postings across all different sectors and social impact career arenas. And then I developed a list of the skills that I saw over and over in many of these job postings. So these are good ones to think about. So many of you may already have many of these skills. They're general skills, and this is great. So if you're looking for what skills are transferable, this is a very good start to look at. So number one, not surprisingly, communication. So the ability to communicate, writing, speaking, and conveying complex topics to lay audiences. So that's very important. I'm not going to go through the how to show or how to gain these skills, but you can look through this later and really look at how might I show this skill, or how might I gain it if I don't already have it. Team experience, working in teams with people from different disciplines and cultural backgrounds. That's a high demand skill. So many of you already have that, even if it might not be in a social impact setting. People skills, so the ability to get along well with others, to maybe build relationships, to be a good listener, and then also the ability to manage conflicts. Leadership potential, employers are always looking out, even if it's for an entry-level role, what is the potential for this person to eventually move into a leadership role if they stay for a length of time. So thinking about where do you have experience? Have you led people? Have you led programs? Or perhaps even just taken the initiative to improve things without being asked? That shows initiative and leadership potential. The next universal or transferable skill would be looking at relevant project experience. This is so important. Employers really look for that specificity on your resumes. So you'll want to put as much relevant experience on there as possible through work that you've done, internships, and again, volunteer work, technical skills, certainly. So these are very specific, and you'll have to look at individual job postings to learn what those technical skills might be. In some cases, it's software or fieldwork skills or whatever. So these are ones that employers seek. Creative problem solving. So the ability to think creatively and solve problems in innovative ways, that's universal. And there's probably many of you here can think of examples where you've had to do that in your work, even if it's not in the social impact arena. Management skills. So as you aspire to higher level roles or look for management level roles, looking to have experience in budget development, creating vision, maybe hiring and training and motivating staff and volunteers, et cetera. So those sorts of skills are highly sought after. And then, so that's, that's what I wanted to highlight in terms of the skill sets that you really need to think about transferable skills in social impact careers. And then highlighting a few tips on how can you stand out in this job market for social impact careers. Have a clear career target. Number one, so many people have kind of this shotgun approach where you look at a lot of different things. And as you're first exploring, a lot of people are all over the map, but it's so important to kind of focus in and give some thought to what are the areas where I would be excited about, but also be really competitive when I apply to those roles. So having it narrowed down to one or two specific job titles can be super helpful. And then networking, of course. So, building your network over time, it's all about relationship development and keeping in touch with some of these contacts. So your first contact may be these informational interviews, but you'll want to keep in touch with these people over time to be able to leverage your network later on. So, and that's also very important in the job search to be able to know when is it appropriate, when is it important to leverage these connections. So really, when you're in the job search, your network can help you find these job opportunities and let you know about them. And then again, at decision-making points, you can get back in touch with people who work at companies of interest. So perhaps they might be able to do different things, like put in a good word for you after you submit an application or are in the interview process with a company. Developing an elevator pitch too. I won't go through all of this, but just really thinking about when you're doing informational interviews or you're in an actual interview, having an elevator pitch can really help you, especially in a social impact career, especially for the first part, talking about your career story, sort of what social impact issue motivates you, and hopefully how that ties in with the employer's mission and how their mission resonates with you. That's going to be super important as you talk with employers. But you basically want to have, roughly a 30-second elevator pitch that you can introduce yourself quickly to employers. And then, of course, customizing your resume is super important. I am going to be providing you with multiple tools here. This first one is a resume customization tool. You'll have a link to this as well, but basically this is a nice tool to really help you take a job posting and make sure that all of your bullets are highly targeted for that position, which will help you tremendously, because studies have shown that the typical employer spends only 7 seconds looking at your resume before deciding whether or not to move on. So you've got to really make your content stand out and be highly targeted to that role, and that tool will help you. You'll also want to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is saying the same story as your resume, so highlighting some of the same skill sets after you've really thought through what types of roles you're targeting and what sort of skill sets are needed. Your LinkedIn profile should show those as well. And here are a couple of tools you can look at later to help you strengthen your LinkedIn profile. Cover letters. This is very, very important for social impact careers, because this is truly one of the only places where you can be a little bit more personal and talk about your passion for the mission of the organization. That has to come out in your cover letter. It's hard to show in the resume. I mean, you might have relevant experiences, but in the cover letter is the place to truly show what you're passionate about and how you connect with the mission of the organization, and that will make you stand out. You can also highlight any, red flags to address that right up front. I've worked with a lot of people who might have gaps in their career, or maybe their experience is a mishmash of things and doesn't tell a cohesive story, or maybe you're facing a major career change. Those things typically need to be addressed briefly, positively, but right up in the cover letter. Otherwise, the employer will often make assumptions, and you'll find that you'll get passed over. Another way to stand out is being creative. So you can click on this later, but I have one of my clients who worked on a website that showcased her work samples, which got her hired very quickly. And she gave me permission to share this. So feel free to check that out. But that's a great place where you can stand out by being creative. Also, of course, preparing for your interview. I won't go through all of these, but the interview tools I'm going to be providing as well. So you'll see them probably in the links and in the follow-up email, but there's some interview prep questions that I'm going to be providing you with. So one is commonly asked interview questions, and also behavioral interview questions with kind of the framework of how to answer those effectively in an interview. I'm also providing links here to how to do well in a phone interview, usually your first typical screening interview, and then also video interview tips, because that's everyone today in the interviewing world. Another tip, which is kind of unique, is to think about is I've had people who make it all the way to the interview stage, but maybe not make it to the offer stage. So this is just a note to always be gracious, because I've had clients who were not offered a position initially, but were very gracious about it. And when a new similar position came up, they were amongst the first to be contacted, and people have actually gotten jobs as a candidate for a second place candidate for one job, but then a top candidate for another. And then learning from successful pandemic job seekers. I know this is heavy probably on a lot of people's minds, right? Like how do you job seek in this pandemic during these difficult times? I've actually written an article on that finding, this is a green career, but I think it applies across social impact careers. What are some actual tips from real people? And many of them are alumni, but finding a green career during challenging times is the name of the article. You can check that out later. You'll get direct tips from people who've succeeded in their job and internship searches during the pandemic. Won't go into all of these, but a lot of great resources you can click on later to learn more about social impact careers. And couple last plugs. So as Louise mentioned, I am a preferred career coach with the Alumni Association of University of Michigan. So that's a great program. I encourage all of you to check it out. I'm one of many coaches. So you can go to the website to really look at the coaches' profiles and see if someone resonates with you, but they do a lot of different services, from resume reviews to interviewing skills, preparing for an industry change, figuring out interests and strengths, etc. So take a look at this program. It's a great program. And as I think Louise mentioned also, that all of the coaches on here are offering a discount to their services to all U of M alumni. Prices will vary, so you can find that on the website. And then I want to make sure we have time for questions. So let me wrap up, and I just want to thank you for your patience. I hope that you found this informative, and here's a link to my website. So you'll see, again, you'll get the copy of this presentation, but this will link you to my website. You can see the types of career services I provide. You can fill out my online form, which is at the top of any of my web pages, and sign up for a free 30-minute coaching session. And I do provide a 10% discount to alums, students and alums. So at this time, I would love to hear any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. We've had a ton of questions. So it seems like a ton of our alumni on the line, and I'm going to merge all of these questions into one whole question. We've touched on this a little bit, but we've got a lot of alumni who have worked in a non-social impact job of some kind, but are now trying to break into a social impact career, and are looking to, and I think you've touched on it with your transferable skills document that you referenced.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak a little bit more about how they can go about doing that kind of very significant career change?
Yes, so I touched on that a little bit. So that's like, if you are in a functional role, right, that perhaps that's one of the strategies I mentioned. So if you're willing to, let's say you have a finance background, not in social impact, but maybe you'd like to use that to leverage a career in finance, at least initially, to start with a social impact organization. That would be one strategy that I would highly recommend to be competitive for. You could easily be slotted into a similar role with a social impact organization. And then I would say from there, you would want to gain, relevant experience, right? You could do volunteer work on the side to start gaining more expertise on the issues that you're passionate about, and getting a broader experience outside of that organization, even to gain experiences. You might even find opportunities within that organization to do, let's say it's environmental work that you're interested in. Informally, you could be doing things like maybe helping set up a recycling program. If it's sustainability is your passion, perhaps you might be able to help the organization set up a recycling or composting program within the office. Those are small things, but you can put that on your resume and build from there. You could possibly insert yourself into teams, like there might be informal working groups or committees that are doing some work around social impact issues that you could volunteer for and work with that team of people. And that's also a great way. So I would say things like that. And then, as I said, if you're thinking that if you're looking at these job postings and finding like, hey, I need a different degree, you're going to have to ask yourself, am I willing to go back and get additional education or a certificate program, or take maybe a few classes to show that expertise, or maybe take on some pro bono project work, that you could do. That could also go on your resume as well. So you could, as you gain more knowledge, you might start to do a little bit of pro bono work for nonprofits or whatever in the focus area where you are wanting to gain that skill, and then have that on there. As I said, the other option is starting at a more entry level role if you're willing to do that. So, if you're willing to take a step or two back and start at a more entry level role to really then rise up from there, that's another strategy that you might consider.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Really great advice. I love the advice you're giving about if you have experience in a certain kind of more general area, such as finance, marketing, taking those skills and then applying it to a social impact role, right? One other activity that was mentioned in one of our career change sessions that we did with another one of our coaches that we will also share with you might be helpful. So jumping onto pulling up 5 job specs, popping them into Wordle, all the relevant, requirements, kind of like the activity you did for Green Careers, the reference you referred to earlier, the research you did, something very similar where you would look at those skill sets and then ask yourself, do I have these? And then use those to reference in your resume, right? So very good advice. Thank you so much. So jumping into another question that we've gotten, again, you've touched on this a little bit, but talking a little bit about salaries, would you say, and this is a question that's come up, would it be possible to have a financially rewarding social impact career? And this is a broad question. I know there's so much variation across, private versus public sector.
Yeah, I would say definitely. And there's a lot of factors here, right, at play, depending on what city you live in, how expensive is it to live in that city? So living in Omaha, Nebraska would be quite different than like San Francisco, California. So the pay rates there can vary significantly, and a lower pay rate in Omaha, Nebraska, you might be living in luxury. So thinking about that, but I would say definitely do the research, the links that I provided on salary research resources, look at those to ground truth it. But certainly I've seen some, very, high paying jobs. I would say in the corporate sector, like you have, some of the sustainability roles at the higher level. I was just looking at some data for like director level roles at companies. For director of sustainability roles are 100,000 plus, salary. Not too shabby, I would say. But then you have, other roles, also government roles, typically federal agency roles pay fairly well, depending on where you enter into. For some of the younger students or recent graduates, there's a presidential management fellowship program, which is highly competitive. And, you can look for kind of these accelerated growth potential roles. So that's one of them that I want to highlight. So that's open to master's and PhD students in their graduating year or within, 2 years of graduation from those higher level degree programs. They're looking for the best and the brightest to basically train them for management level roles. So that one will get you on a much faster promotion track. So you can look for opportunities like that in some of these sectors. And then really, looking at other salary resources to really, I would say even in the nonprofit world, it varies significantly. I've had experiences of, seeing salary information from 2 different nonprofits, and, they're all over, they vary significantly. So I wouldn't write off one sector based on, some, one data point that you have or something like that. So I would say, yes, for sure, there are opportunities. There's so many different social impact career opportunities out there. And if salary is something that's, really important to you, do your research, so that you go down the path to find a role that's rewarding for you in all the ways that you want it to be. Louise, I think you're muted.
Sorry, guys, rookie error on my part. So talking about social impact jobs, one of our alums is asking you about remote positions and finding ones that require minimal driving. Can we talk about this? And I think you did touch on this already a little bit.
Yes. So those sites that I put up earlier in my presentation, there were a couple of places where you could look for remote jobs. And then from there, it's really individual. You'd have to look at each position to see which ones, would require, would be truly remote, where you could do most of the job from home and not have to travel at all. There's all sorts of hybrid roles where maybe you do a lot of travel, even though you're located remotely. So you'll have to look for that. In other roles, sometimes it's you're not necessarily working in the employer's office. You can work from home, but they expect you, perhaps to report to like Washington, D.C., even if you live in Michigan every so often. So it's really individual. You'll have to really look for roles that do not require you to go out. So that's a little bit hard one to answer, but I think through, looking at those websites and really looking at those individual postings, that's going to tell you, which roles truly are fully remote with very little travel or driving involved.
Thank you so much. So we're going to try squeak in 2 more questions before we hit the top of the hour, if that's okay with you, Lisa.
Sure.
So we have a question about sustainability certifications. Can you talk a little bit about professional certifications that you recommend for those who are pursuing sustainability careers, particularly sustainability sourcing?
Yeah, I would say there's a great article that came out. I wouldn't call myself an expert, in this area. There's so many different certifications out there, but I would say there are there's an article. I don't know if I provided you with that link, Louise. I may not have, I can't remember, but there is a great article. If I didn't, I will go ahead and provide that for the follow-up email for Wednesday, but that lists a lot of, it's a breakdown of all sorts of different sustainability certifications and how they might be helpful. So I think that one would truly, I'll make a note to add that there.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I would
And I
also,
think, sorry.
I was going to just add Green Biz is a great place also to look for resources on that. There's a huge community of corporate sustainability professionals on there and platforms where you can learn more about the certification. So that would be a good one. But I will make a note to send the link to the sustainability certifications article.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And I do know we had actually another question just come into our QA as well about that question, specifically around sustainable certification. So thank you so much. So I think we are at the top of the hour. We tried to get to as many questions as possible. I know we did not get to all of the questions, but I'd like to thank you, Lisa. I'd like to thank every single alum who was on the call. It seems to me that this session was packed with incredible links, incredible resources. So please do look out from that email from us, from the Alumni Association that comes out tomorrow. We're going to link to everything that we've referenced today. We also will be sharing the recording from the session as well as the slides. So look out for that email. Lisa, without further ado, thank you so much for your time, for your expertise, for giving back to the University of Michigan community. We really appreciate you. And we just appreciate you coming back to share with us everything at Green Career Advisor. Please reach out to Green Career Advisor as well if you want to pursue your career in sustainability careers or green careers. Lisa is your coach. She's the one you should reach out to. So please go ahead and look for her. She's listed on our site and under our career coaching program. Thank you so much, Lisa.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, and go blue.